Who am I? I work here at UC Davis in Strategic Communications. We used to be called University Communications. I produce a ton of photos and videos for the university. Everything ranging from chancellor messages, if you see him talking like on Facebook, whatever, to news stories about some of the research that's happening on here, to like feature stories, to live videos, whatever's going on. I tend to be part of that. A lot of our stuff ends up on the YouTube page, or on the UC Davis homepage, Facebook, social media, all of that. If you guys have been to the last 2 Speak series, those 2 of my colleagues, Sally and Kat, 2 great colleagues actually. And I got my start in news. I have a master's from Columbia in journalism and a bachelor's in photography, where I focus on documentary photography from San Jose State. And before that, I worked at newsrooms. And since coming to Davis, prior to Davis, I worked at newsrooms like the New York Times, the Star Ledger, and Tahoe, the Bay Area News Group. And that was really my foundation for this. Here at Davis, I was really able to dive into some video storytelling. And it's been, I know you guys all probably have some really good jobs, but I think I have like an amazing job. I get to do so many good stuff, interact with so many good people, and tell a lot of really good stories here. And we have I have some really great colleagues in my department too. We have some filmmakers that have produced TV shows like for Discovery and all these other different channels. They've gone to several film schools. We have some great photographers. So we really have a really good and strong visual communications department there. So today we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. This is going to be like, there's a lot going on. And if at some point you're like, slow down, just tell me to slow down. If you have questions that are relevant to the slide up there, just go ahead and raise your hand, ask. This should be a conversation, much like our interviews should be when we're shooting video. But we are going to talk about what makes good video and what goes into that. And there is a lot that goes into that. We're going to walk through producing a video that I produced last year. And we'll talk about the pre-production, the production process. And we're going to talk about where videos go. So we're talking about when we post them on social media. And we're going to talk about gear. Everybody loves gear. I love gear. So a lot of stuff. But first, we're going to start out with a video. And as you watch this, I want you guys to be really active viewers on this, right? Kind of pay attention to the information that's in it, to some of the shots. You don't have to completely break it down or anything like that, but just be a little more active about what's in there.
The thing that's so exciting about this stream is that it's showing us that there's a new path forward when we want to think about making our rivers better. A lot of people think about restoration like we have to move people off, we have to stop cattle ranching, we have to stop agriculture. But this river exists like this in the middle of an active cattle ranch. So that tells us that there's a place for people in the solution. In this case, we're trying to help recover a particular species of salmon that lives in the Shasta River, coho salmon.
Salmon, as we know them, have been around for at least 50 million years. They have weathered extreme events throughout that history, earthquakes, mega droughts, floods. And the reason they're able to persist is because some die off during tough times, others hang on. The species as a whole can persevere into the future. Today, we don't have that diversity.
One of the problems that salmon are facing is there just aren't that many of them anymore. And at the same time, there's more people and less water. So as time goes on, it becomes harder to find that perfect place where we get to share the water with all the people who need it, as well as the fish who need it to survive. To solve these problems, we need a lot of basic information. So the science that we do is to answer questions about how much water is in the stream. That tells us how much water we have to work with. What temperature is the water? That tells us if it's good water for fish or good water for irrigation. What kind of habitat exists here? What kind of deep, slow pools where the fish can slow down and grow? What kind of food is here? So all of that information is data we're collecting when we come out into the fields and sample bugs or measure stream flow or measure water temperature. Being in places like this helps me feel like my soul has been plugged in. Places like the Little Shasta speak to the people's souls who have lived here all of their lives and for many generations. Being able to preserve it and pass it on to future generations, is important to them. there are solutions that can help us maintain the environment and maintain our own, not just livelihoods, but heritage.
Also, if you are watching us via live stream, just go ahead and make sure your mic is muted. We heard some conversations pop up there. But so this video ran in the New York Times as part of our partnership with them as far as the climate series, kind of talking about water from the Sierra to the sea. So we talked about the Little Shasta in that series. We talked about Tahoe. We talked about Bodega Marine Lab. This video, one reason I wanted to show this video and liked it, because it shows our research, right? It shows our researchers out in the field, kind of just doing, maybe they're not exactly doing what they're doing because, they were out there with us, but it shows the environment that they're interacting in. It shows where they're working. It's very clear and easy. I mean, Anne's a great communicator, somebody who speaks very plainly, and that's super important. She did a really good job of that in that video. And there's like an attempted emotional connection at the end there, right? Talking about like the value of protecting, in this case, the species of fish. So this kind of leads into why video. Why do you want to make a video? And the first thing is, again, you can show your work. Oftentimes we talk in abstracts or we're just describing in words, and it really doesn't make that connection. How many times have you tried to explain something to someone and be like, here, just let me show you. This is essentially what we're doing. We're just going to show people exactly what we're doing. This is a chance for you to make an emotional connection. That's a huge part of video and visuals, is really connecting with the viewer and our audiences. And it really reinforces the impact of the work that you're doing. And this is speaking to those, if you are a researcher in here, or you're doing some research, you're a student, or you're a science communicator, it's so important to kind of really connect that to people's everyday lives. And we can do that through video easier maybe than we can do with words. And last, we can reach more people. We can reach new audiences, right? We're going to go where they are. So this gives you a chance to be on platforms such as Facebook or YouTube or whatever social media platform you're using and tackle audiences that are there in that space. Maybe they're not like reading the local newspaper, but they are there. So it gives us a chance to reach those people. Here's an example of like showing your work. This was a New York Times Science Take video. And I thought it was great because it's made mostly from B-roll that somebody's collected as they're doing their research, but it really does allow you to see what they're doing. And it's a big bonus that it has like some really cute animals in it.
Wow, that is one determined baby sea turtle. On a beach right after hatching, that would be called a crawling frenzy. In a lab, on a little treadmill made from a belt sander, it's a test of stamina. Researchers want to know if more time spent crawling leaves the turtles tired when they reach the sea. Sea turtles hatch at night. In an ideal world, they scrabble down the beach toward the horizon over the water. It's brighter than the horizon over land. Then they swim for up to a day to get to the Gulf Stream. That's in an ideal world, with no city lights. If they're on Florida's Atlantic coast, say near Boca Raton, there are lots of competing light sources. Many hatchlings get confused and just wander around, or they head straight for a bright building away from the sea. To test whether this extra wandering tired the babies out, researchers took 150 loggerhead and green sea turtle hatchlings to the lab and set them to crawling. Lured by a light at the front of the treadmill, they moved more than 500 yards, pausing now and then to rest. They could have given the turtles a longer trek, except for one thing.
It just took so long that the turtle could do it, but the graduate student couldn't.
After the treadmill, the turtles hit the pool, swimming in a small tank. To everyone's surprise, they were just fine. Tests of blood and respiration showed that the babies were not tired out by the crawling. All those stops left them in good shape, but the lights are still a problem. Every extra minute on the beach leaves the babies exposed to predators, raccoons, foxes, birds. And if they're still on the beach when the sun comes up, they're cooked. All of this is why Dr. Milton was pretty irritated by one particular house.
It made me want to leave a note on their door. Hi, you are personally responsible for the disorientation of 60 turtles last night.
So, Boca Raton residents, and this means you, douse that light.
So that's a great example of being able to show some of the research that's happening, right? And it allows people to kind of really connect with it. Like you have these animals that are cute, and most people like cute animals. But it also talked about like impact that we're making in our environment as well, right? So everybody kind of thought for a second when we talked about light pollution and disrupting their migration or whatever, like just makes you think a little bit about the things that you do. Oftentimes too, as researchers, you are out there like collecting data like that, visual data, right? You're taking pictures, you're taking video, and you can tell in there they have a very like specific treatment for that type of footage, right? They put it against the white background because it probably didn't scale enough, but it's usable, right? So and it looks great. So a lot of this stuff maybe you already have to where you can put something together. This next video is taking a look at emotional connection. This is from Square, which is kind of like that digital credit card machine. And I mean, like, what is a digital credit card machine company talking about emotional connection, right? But they really see the value in that, and they make an attempt. They make a really good attempt. This is just the trailer for this video. If you want to watch the full one, it'll be in the show notes or in the presentation notes, and you can watch it later. It's totally worth it. It's about like 8 minutes long.
Being Lakota, we've had this oppressive weight for all these years. When you have poverty added to the historical trauma, you have to step into places that are uncomfortable in order to do the work that we're trying to do with our kids. There's nothing we can't or shouldn't do to help them.
So again, from a credit card company, like we can do that, right? We're doing work here every day that is like literally directly impacting thousands of lives. So we can make that connection, no problem. When I say people are watching these, this is just on Facebook. The turtle video had 550,000 views. And then the Lakota video had 2 million views. That doesn't count like YouTube or their home sites or whatever, wherever sites they're hosting it, the Time site. That's a lot of views right there.
Do you know the UC Davis video view numbers?
Yeah, I mean, which one?
The UC Davis with Ann Willis.
Oh, I don't. So that's one that didn't, because of the agreement we have with the Times, it actually just ran on their site at first. And so we didn't, like all the Washington Post videos, if you guys saw that series, we did host those on YouTube. But for that specific video, it just went on the New York Times. And I don't know if you saw those numbers. It is on YouTube now, but it's just kind of, we haven't pushed it out yet or anything. It's just sitting there. Cool. Okay. So what makes a good video? Now we're gonna kind of get into nuts and bolts of some stuff, right? But this is like 3 simple things of what makes a good video, right? It has a good story. And what do we mean by good story? Essentially, we want to say like audiences can connect to it. It's focused and engaging. So I think some people might kind of equate that with like length of a video, right? And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but I don't think there's a hard length for a video, right? For it to be focused and engaging. I really do think the story dictates that. My most popular video here is about 4 minutes long, and it has like 6 million views. It's like consistently our most popular video every month. But with that said though, most stories I feel like are on the shorter side. That story dictates a shorter length. And then we want it to look good and sound good. And this is where technical abilities do come into play a bit. We are supplying info, but when we get to video, we're also entertaining a little bit, right? That's why we invest so much time into how things look and how things sound. And in particular, when we talk about audio, like we want it to sound good. If your video doesn't sound good, people aren't going to watch it. They will watch out of focus, fuzzy, small, super stretched video if they can hear what's happening, but on most platforms. But if there's like sound, there's wind, it's like shh, you can't hear them, they're going to click out right away. And we talk about visuals too, looking good, sounding good. We want those visuals to be relevant to whatever it is that we are talking about. And design matters, right? It's like don't put your posters in there. Like, make an attempt to make it look fairly like, nice and present an effort in there. So let's go deeper into like story, right? Story is difficult, right? And that's the most important part of it. What makes a good story? So first, there's some sort of newness to it, right? There's something new about it, whether it's new research coming out, new information coming out. Maybe it's the first time being told in this medium, maybe because it hasn't seen these audiences yet, so that's one newness about it. Or there's just developments to an older story. And it's important that we can show what we're talking about as well. There's a relevance to it, so that anybody watching this, that they can like come away like knowing that what's in there has either impacted them or somebody they know. And really, and if you think about it, we're lucky here because, again, everything we do here has some sort of impact. It's just important, though, that we show how and why in that video. And then it's understandable and relatable. And this is super important when we talk about science communication, right? In that the information we put out there, I like to say like a high school freshman watching it will understand it. So we're considering the language that we put in it, like jargon. We're watching the jargon. And we're thinking about how much information we're putting into it, right? And we're going to go deeper into that a little bit later. So when we talk about it being focused and engaging, you want to know your audience, right? Who is this video for? What do they already know about this subject? Where are they going to be watching it? Oftentimes, we'll talk about this too, where they watch it actually really determines who your audience is, right? Like if you are aiming for, high schoolers or, young students, maybe Facebook's not the place to go. If you know this is going on Facebook, like it's a different audience, right? Than YouTube, than Snapchat, than Instagram, wherever you go, you got to think about that. When you answer these questions, when you answer that question, who is your audience, it really helps informs you and gives you like that first step into like what kind of content you need to gather when you're out shooting or doing an interview. It also kind of helps dictates to like the shape of your video, right? Is it going to be a 16:9 or is it going to be like a vertical video, square video? Like that's all a consideration. And we'll specifically talk about that too. You want your message to be focused, right? Oops, sorry. You want to have like a single strong idea driving your video. And this is what I call like that one-liner, right? That I have one strong idea that I like let guide me through this video. Like what do I want to reinforce? So if somebody walks away from this video, they at least get some of that, right? And you can't try to do too much. Some things you just can't explain everything, right? We're not like teaching a class in this video. We're just trying to get a point across. And sometimes you end up leaving really good stuff out. And it's painful. And I've spent like hours trying to fit stuff in that ultimately like I should have just like gave up because it just doesn't work, even though it's so good. And that happens. But you really got to honor the story and really, drive on that one-liner. No jargon. I just mentioned that. I mentioned again, like that's the big thing, right? And like the word sediment to me is jargon. Like you have to get simple about it, right? Like what does a high school freshman know? Essentially they're an 8th grader, a middle schooler. What do they know? And really here, like if it goes on any of our channels, there's a good chance that a high schooler is watching it, right? So they have to be able to understand it. Even if you're a grad student or you're teaching grad level courses, like the people that are viewing our videos, I mean, they don't know a lot, right? Or they don't know they're not experts or scientists or anything like that. And something that's super important, and I think that we want to touch on in any sort of communications that we give, right, is tell people why it matters. Like, why is this important that I'm out in the middle of the Little Shasta River, trying to save a fish? Like, why should I care? I can't reinforce how important that is. And that can go in any part of the video. Sometimes it tends to go at the end, but you want to make sure you touch on that. And then lastly, we're talking about when it looks good, sounds good. We want our interviews to be in quiet places with clean backgrounds. And so that means not distracting. When we say a quiet place, like there's not a buzz going on, right? There's not a big echo. We want to avoid echo. So if you're like in an office, I know some people have really nice big offices. I do not. I can touch the wall on either side of my office. That's a bad place because I just get nothing but bounce coming off. And my walls are concrete too. So it's just not good. But you want to be in a nice open room like this isn't bad, right? We got carpet on the floors. We got high ceilings, a lot of space for the sound to travel. When I go into a room, and we'll talk a little bit more too about this, but like I'm looking for windows for good lighting and stuff like that. Our visuals, they're relevant to the topic, right? So if you get your interview, oftentimes we'll call that our A roll, right? So it's just like that's the words, the content of the video. We want our B roll, which we will lay over that, to be relevant visuals to what's being spoken. So if you're talking about fish, we want to see fish, right? You'd be surprised how it doesn't happen. And again, if you guys have any questions throughout, feel free to ask. If I'm moving too quickly, let me know. We want to use a microphone when we're talking, right? So there's a couple cameras out there that work with just the microphone built into the camera, right? And they work like maybe this far away. In general, though, you always want to have a microphone, whether that is something that is a lapel mic, a lavalier mic that attaches right here, and those can be wireless or wired, or a shotgun mic, which sits on the camera sometimes, or we use it as a boom, and it goes above the camera, or above the subject. Either way, you're figuring that out. And you're using headphones. You should never do an interview without headphones, right? So you can hear what's coming through the camera. Because some of these mics are super sensitive, and like they'll pick up sounds and frequencies that maybe your ear doesn't pick up as prevalent, right? And it's actually really true here on campus. For some reason, our mics love like the bike chains as they go around. Like, so they'll be a little bit louder than some other noises coming around. You know, like you take it off, like, oh, that's not as loud, but a weird thing about campus.
Do you usually record separate tracks for the person asking the questions and the person being interviewed so that it's easier to mix them later than just both people talking in the same track?
So, I mean, most of the time we don't really, like the interview, we don't really put the interviewer in the video. But if I were, I don't think it's super important because if they're so close, like, you know, even if they had separate tracks, their microphones would probably pick up on each. I would mic them both, though. If you're like, hey, I need to have the interviewer in it, I would make sure that they have a microphone on. And you could record to, like, you know, put one person on one track and one person on the other. But if they're super close, they're going to get picked up on both. Like, so they'll mix either way a little bit there. But it wouldn't hurt. It might be a little easier to cut and to see when you go into editing. You can see those waveforms.
Just quickly, if someone asks a question, can you repeat the question so people can hear your question? Thank you.
Cool. So the question was if we have multiple people being recorded, like an interviewer, the person asking the question if we should be on separate audio tracks. But if we do have multiple people in the shot, sometimes I'll go to separate tracks. Like, so we have a 2-person shot. I will do separate tracks, and most of that just has to do with the microphones we're using and being able to independently control them. So they'll go into separate channels essentially.
Can we borrow or rent equipment?
So we have limited equipment that we check out. We have these mobile videography kits that I'll show you guys a little bit later, and then sometimes we'll have GoPros depending on the trip or something like that. But if there is like bigger stuff, cameras, we don't have that as much. I do want to say that if you have like a cool story and you think that you'd want us to come out and shoot it, like let me know, because I'm always looking for really good stories to tell.
How long are the rentals for the cameras?
I mean, we don't have a time limit. Yeah, so the question was how long so do we do rentals? We don't really have rentals. We have those mobile kits. How long are they? There's not really a time limit. We just hope that, you know, that you bring it back in a reasonable amount of time, you know? Or if like if you're like, I have multiple times I'm going out to do something or something like that, then like you bring it back and, you know, we can work something out. We had 3 and now we have 1. Like, so I'm not sure where those other 2 are, to be honest. I think somebody's extended their checkout. Somebody just returned 1 today, which is why we have 1. Thank you, whoever did that. where were we? Okay, and then use a tripod. I cannot tell you how important it is to use a tripod. So we have interns, we have several interns. They are film students here. They go out, get these beautiful shots, and they come back, and their footage is all shaky. It's like, just use a tripod. We have like 7 of them. They're like right there for you. And they do that, and they come back, and they look amazing, right? So that's one way to immediately just bump up that production value. And if you're doing an interview, like it has to be on a tripod, you're just gonna like fall over if you're just sitting there like the whole time trying not to shake and stuff and listen and ask questions. And part of those mobile videography kits, we do have some tripods as well. I wouldn't put a super expensive camera on them, but they're great for like the phones and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, again, I want to reinforce the story is the hardest part of all this, right? Technical abilities, the technicals are fun. I enjoy that part of it. But again, this is the hard part, right? Like figuring out the story. I would say the good thing though is like everybody here has had probably some experience of storytelling, right? Whether you're trying to explain the work that you're doing or that's part of your role here on campus, like you do that, you know that part, right? It's just a matter of simplifying it and making it fit this medium. So don't be too afraid about that. Like you have it in you, I know it. And so much of our stuff is just set up for it. So it really is like not as daunting of a task as it may seem. So next, I'm going to kind of go through, I'm going to show you another video, and then we're going to kind of go through like some of the parts of this video here. This video was part of our Washington Post partnership, where we produced 4 stories for them about climate change and the work that we're doing here. This is on saving the white abalone species out at Bodega Bay with a really great researcher named Kristen. This has like fancy drone shots, multiple locations and stuff like that. But like at the end of the day, I really wanted to show this because it's a really simple story structure, right? There was a problem, there was a body, right? So like our problem, then like kind of work, and then there is like a why it matters moment. So as you watch it again, just kind of think of those 3 things and like think of like that one-liner, what that is. And then, we'll break it down after that.
The white abalone that are left in the wild are so far apart from one another that they can't reproduce successfully. And so we need to breed abalone in captivity and put them back out in the wild so they're close enough together that they can start reproducing on their own. We probably need tens to hundreds of thousands of animals to outplant every year to save this species. We are here in Long Beach to spawn some of our very precious white abalone here. Hopefully they will give us lots of new baby white abalone for our captive breeding program. We put them in this chemical solution, a little love potion, to get them to spawn.
There we go.
So this is the time when I start to get a little bit apprehensive. Oftentimes if we're gonna have a really great spawning attempt, at least 1 or 2 animals will have gone off in the chemicals, and we haven't seen that yet today. I don't think this one's into it. This is certainly a bit disappointing that it hasn't happened here today, but it doesn't detract at all from the fact that we had a banner year. Earlier this year, we had the most successful spawning attempt we've had in the history of the program that resulted in tens of thousands of juvenile abalone. We're working really closely with Dr. Daniel Sweezy here at UC Davis Bodega Marine Lab and with the abalone farms to try to help prepare these animals better for the changing climate that they'll be facing in the wild.
So what we're finding is that the ocean is becoming more acidic and that this change is linked with climate change. And we're finding that that is impacting a lot of shellfish, that it's making it harder for them to grow. And specifically with abalone, we're seeing that a lot more of them die when they're little. But at the same time, there's kind of rays of hope. Some of them seem more resilient. So that's what our work is focused on, is finding those resilient individuals and figuring out if we can grow those abalone as the abalone of the future.
I'm invested both professionally and personally in this. My husband's family has been abalone diving for generations. We met diving, looking for abalone. My engagement ring, which I still wear years after marriage, is an abalone pearl. And we can't wait to teach our daughter one day to dive for abalone. This world is changing so quickly. My hope is that through some of this work, we can slow that change down a little bit. I really hope that abalone is something that our daughter sees as part of her present and part of her life, and not just something that her parents and grandparents enjoyed.
Great. So going back to your question earlier too about working with people, like like somebody like Dan in there, he's a pretty well-rounded communicator as well. But his talking points, his sound bites, they were succinct, right? They were to the point. They said the important information in there. So he's actually a really great person, and so is Kristen. I mean, she's out every day selling this program. So again, she's somebody that's experienced, but what I really liked about this video too was some of her she was just candid about stuff too. As she walked, she was really open, and I feel like that gave us a view into her process as far as doing her research and her work. And I thought that was really authentic and just fun to see, and maybe not a side of science that people get to see a lot. And so that's one thing we can do, right? Is just expose them to different areas. So, all right. So I'm going to not show you this because you've seen the beginning a few times now, but. So we started with that hook, right? The reason why people want to stay. And this is kind of similar to what maybe print journalists talk about, is having a lead in a nut graph, right? This is that introduction. And we hit it really hard in the beginning here, talking about hey, there's a problem with white abalone, right? There's not enough of them, and we got to, make more, essentially. And that's what we're doing. And hopefully that's enough to keep the viewer there. Let's skip this. So this is the what we're doing part. You saw a lot of that in there. It's actually a big chunk of that video, showing the process of the science. And this is just a clip of that part. And I'm just going to show it again so you can kind of see what I'm talking about.
Here we had the most successful spawning attempt we've had in the history of the program that resulted in tens of thousands of juvenile abalone.
Again, this is planning shots too for text, right? I'm keeping that in mind as I shoot this video. Chances are I'm going to put text over it. And so I have spaces for that. So in this part of your video, which is the body of any an essay you're writing, right? This is where you can highlight how we're solving those problems. And we're kind of we're showing it too, right? We showed her at a spawning event. It's kind of hard to show an abalone spawning, right? But we showed her there in the environment at the aquarium. We showed her back at Bodega in her lab going through the abalone she did spawn a long time ago. And we showed an abalone. Most times it's probably going to be shorter than that, but you guys get the idea. As you go through this, so it's important to kind of include just what's necessary, right? She could talk about, her and Dan both can go on for days, and they probably have gone on a long time talking about the specifics of the research, but you don't need to, right, to get your point across. Maybe if you're at a science conference you do, or something like that, or with some peers, but not here. Okay, and then the why it matters. Again, this should be in every piece of communications that you do. Just talking about why the heck are we doing what we're doing, investing all this time? And when you connect it and make it relevant to the everyday person, that's gold. That's what we're trying to do. And it's and if you have young children, boom, right? This is it's super relevant here. And here, I'll show you what it was.
This world is changing so quickly. My hope is that through some of this work, we can slow that change down a little bit. I really hope that abalone is something that our daughter sees as part of her present and part of her life, and not just something that her parents and grandparents enjoyed.
So again, people, they can relate to that, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is just relate to people that are watching our videos. And so one thing I want to say too, so the video you guys saw, it was 3.5 minutes, maybe it's 3:40 or something like that. If I just put those 3 clips, you guys didn't watch the hook, but essentially that first 30 seconds together, that would be a sufficient video, right? It would say, what we're doing, how we're doing it, and then why it's important. That'd be enough, at the end of the day. It's probably my ego that makes me fill in the rest of the pretty shots and stuff like that. But that would be enough. So now we're going to kind of go through a video that I produce. I'm going to walk you through like my thought process of how I put this thing together, right? Again, reading like kind of in the weeds here, but I hope you guys kind of walk away with just like a really solid idea of how I go through a shoot. This one ran in the Washington Post as well, and this one has to do with carbon sequestration in our soil.
I love this part. This is like my favorite. I could literally sit out here and watch them eat like for hours. They're a favorite because of how you manage them and how they impact the land, and they're not quite as hard on it as the pigs are and the chickens are. Don't tell the pigs. Here's where we just moved from, and then we went over there to where the sheep are. And then over there is where we're about to go. We started out over here, so it's already come back. We could when we're finished, we could even come back again and graze another time through. With the sheep, when we move them around, they're in kind of a small area. They're eating down all the grass. We take them off of that area and move them to the next area, and those plants regenerate, and so those nutrients that came from the animal are more readily available not only for the plants but also for all the soil microbes, and so that just kind of creates more activity and, in theory, more carbon sequestration.
Cool. So that video, again, like I said, it was for the Washington Post. It ran in May, somewhere around there. And we got this assignment, right? We're like, all right, we have to. I think we got like, hey, we have to have this video ready in like 3 weeks or something like that, something kind of crazy. And so the first thing I did was I thought about like, okay, what's the story? What's that one-liner that we want people to walk away with? And in this case, it's a little more. It's not like it was kind of a heavy subject, right? Like it's a little bit new research. I don't think people have been exposed to this specific part of it a ton. So, but we wanted to say carbon can be removed from the atmosphere and stored in the ground with the help of ranchers and practices recommended by UC Davis to help curb the effects of climate change. That was our one-liner, a little bit longer than most, but pretty much distinctly what we wanted to say, right? That this is a thing, it can help curbing carbon sequestration, and we're doing it in partnerships with ranchers. So that was our one line. That was our first thing I did. And then I was like, all right, who's going to see this? It's going to go on the Washington Post, right? So we understand that most people in Washington have an idea of climate change and believe in it and like understand it, right? We wanted to get in front of policymakers and thought leaders. And so we knew that they had a kind of a baseline knowledge and that we didn't have to go back and just explain, what climate change is or like, what's causing it, all that fun stuff. That's a big help. So at this point, I hadn't even thought about what this is going to look like or who's going to be in it or anything like that. I just wanted to get that story nailed down in that one-liner. Now that I'm going into it, okay, what the heck are we going to film, right? Like, how do you film carbon sequestration? Like, what does that look like? Another problem is our lead researcher on this, she was out of the country. I think it was Kate Scow. We had done an interview with her, but it wasn't going to work for this video. She wasn't around. So that kind of just blows up any plans we have, right? Like, oh man, what are we going to do? But I did have, I knew I needed to show a rancher, and I knew that we had to explain the process. Those are two things that we had to do. So I had tried to track down a rancher. I'm really good at Googling and tracking down, stuff like that. And I had to find somebody from UC Davis, and I ended up stumbling across Skylark Ranch in Alexis, who is a UC Davis grad. And I was like, hey, you guys want to be in the Washington Post? And they were like, yeah. And so that's what we did. And so they were great about it. And they had this great ranch up in Brooks, California, in the Capay Valley. And so going into this, I knew that like the hook, we're probably just gonna have to get right into like the science part of it, right? Like explain that science behind it. But first we had to find a way to keep people in. And like, again, cute animals always worked. So we led with the sheep, and we wanted to show like a sense of authenticity, right? Like show like who these people are and who the people are doing this kind of work and efforts, right? And so Alexis offered a great way into that. And then we showed, we had that intro, and then we went into like, hey, rangelands can store a ton of carbon. Again, we were keeping in mind, we knew we were going to use text to explain a lot of this because we didn't have our researcher there to do it. So we had those drone shots, and like we use drones a lot, and you've seen these videos, we use drones. You don't have to, right? You just have to have like, you have to frame your shots in a way that's going to be well for video, right? Like well for text on video. And in this case in particular, we knew we were going to have those animations with those like carbon bubbles coming up and down. And so we shot to that. We shot very flat, and we allowed it to come into the grass and stuff like that. So that was very intentional. And those kind of things you definitely want to be considering as you go into a shoot. Because otherwise, like if you just try to piece it together, you might have to compromise a little bit. And then I thought about too, like why it matters. And this is like kind of an outline, right? Like sometimes I write it down, sometimes I just think it out. So for us, we knew that there's a reason why it matters, right? We want to stop the effects of climate change as much as we can, but also we wanted to show too that we were working in partnership with ranchers, on this effort as well. That was another big thing too. So I had all those three things in mind as I thought about what this video is going to kind of look like and start shaping it. And of course, we kind of filmed documentary style, so it kind of all just like can go to heck when you get out there, right? Like things can just like go completely wrong. Like no abalone spawn. So the things happens. Location, right? Like we lucked out. We had like a gorgeous location in like right after like a really heavy rain season. So everything was super green still. And for and it mattered too because, we need grazing, right? We need sheep grazing. So that's a time of year where they are very active. Sometimes you don't have a choice, but I am always looking for some place that is visually interesting to do an interview. And that allows me to capture clean, clear audio. In this case, a lot of our main interview took place on a hill, right, in the Capay Valley, which can just be windy. So I actually looked up weather reports. I have an app that can track the sun as well, so I do that. Preferably I'd go out and scout it, but it's kind of a drive to get out there. Not a super long drive, but I have 2 hours sometimes just to get out there. So Google Maps, I Google Mapped it, and that's a super useful tool too as well. And lastly, a pre-interview. Pre-interviews are so important. I feel like it helps you to have a really strong idea. If you're going nervous into a video interview, oftentimes it's because maybe you don't have a firm grasp on what you want to try to communicate, right? And that happens a lot still. But by pre-interviewing, it really helps to go in there super informed. I had 3 of them with Alexis actually, just to be clear on what we're going to talk about and fully understanding the science behind it. And she understood it way better than me. Cool. So when it comes to production, I schedule my production around the interview, right? I know what time I'm going to shoot the interview. So in this case, we knew we were going to shoot the interview kind of as the sun was going down, as it was getting lower. And that also kind of coincided with the time where they do some of their chores, such as feeding animals, shifting the animals around. So we knew we had to be there. We had to shoot the interview at that time. So we got there early to shoot a lot of our other B-roll, the drone stuff, the stuff that we're going to put text over. And but really, I think the point I wanted to drive home here is that we're really planning around our interview and when we're going to do there. And also kind of gave them a time for that. Gave our subjects a time to kind of get used to us, Alexis and her husband. They were kind of out interacting with us a bit. They went and did their own thing while we were shooting the drone stuff, and then they came back and they'd already known us for a little bit.
In your pre-production, how much planning do you do? Do you storyboard and know exactly what your shots you want them to look like, or do you have your text figured out?
Yeah, so the question is, how much are we storyboarding, pre-producing, planning out our shots? So not we go out with a general idea, right? We don't go out with like a storyboard. We don't go out with like a shot list all the time. Like we have an idea, but oftentimes we haven't seen like the location. And I would say most of the time we haven't seen the location. We just kind of know subjects, or we just know like actions that we want to capture, right? Our sequences. Like we knew we wanted to capture them feeding. We knew we wanted to capture them moving the sheep around. So we have those shots in mind. And then when we get out there, you know, we're moving around with some visual variety. In this case, in this video, we were lucky. They have a pretty spectacular Instagram feed, and like they show their farm. So we knew what times we wanted to shoot and where we wanted to shoot. So we had a really strong idea. And again, like it's like practically stalking, right? Like, because I'm trying to figure out all the info I can about these shoots. So we went through their Instagram and found all. And when we actually pitched the Washington Post on this story, we sent them some of the Instagram photos. Like I created a deck and like, hey, this is what it's going to look like. And that really influenced what this looked like as well. And so I don't necessarily have like a specific shot checklist. We just have like actions we know we want to capture when we go out. And again, we shoot like kind of documentary style, so it's not as planned. Same thing with the abalone video. Like I knew I needed to get drone shots of the water, of the facility. I needed to get shots of her interacting with abalone. So I have that general idea, but it's not storyboarded out, right? Because the interviews are they're not scripted, and so some things change a lot. It's a very fluid kind of process. Okay, so this is production. We're there. We're getting set up to shoot those drone shots. Oh, okay, here we go. And so this is what our production initially looked like, right? Again, we're looking for a quiet, non-distracted place. We lucked out with the weather. For some reason, we thought it would be a good idea, you saw in the video, to have like a young child running around. We thought it'd be cute and, you know, kind of fun. Completely distracting. And, you know, she was doing her own thing. And it was great, actually. It worked out. Here we used wireless microphones. And you can kind of see on, does this have a pointer? So on the top of my camera, there is actually a wireless microphone there, and that's and we have two on there. So one's on top and one's kind of just secured to the hand strap, and they both have a microphone on, and that's just to get cleaner audio from them. In an ideal world, I'm actually boom micing them, and that's essentially what that would mean. With that, we would have a stand and a microphone, a shotgun microphone coming over the top of them, and that would. I love that because I think you have better sound, but it's a lot to set up. So I maybe use it like 30% of the time.
What would you use to record that audio?
I go right into the camera. So if you have a nicer camera, the preamps in there are usually pretty solid.
If you set up the boom, what do you use?
I can go into the camera. So we have XLR inputs. Yeah. So that's a big difference.
You can't do that with stationary camera setup?
No, I mean, you could do it with other camera setups. So like say if you had like a DSLR, that only has like a 3.5 millimeter jack. So it's just like that skinny jack that your headphone plugs into. You could do something like that, but you'd have to find a way to power your microphones, right? So a lot of them will take batteries. So you just put a battery in and you'd run it that way. The problem you do run into is sometimes your preamps aren't as good, but honestly for what we do, it'd be fine, right? You just have to make sure that battery lasts in there and it doesn't doesn't run out on you. So the question was, about how do we hook up the boom mics to the camera. In our case, you can kind of see here, we have, it's kind of hard to see actually, but we do have a shotgun mic here that's running into the camera in the back, and that's just collecting scratch audio. This camera is just collecting the main audio, and by having this two cameras set up, having that scratch audio allows us to sync it up and post a little bit better. That's super nuts and bolts, guys, but like this, it's a big setup, but like honestly, this could be like done with just like regular cameras, right? This camera here is on, so that camera, that first camera, it's just on a wide angle lens up close to them. I think we had it on a 24 millimeter lens, right? And this one's super zoomed in, and it's just getting a one shot we call, so just a single of it. We have fancy cameras, but like, again, you could do it with DSLRs, no problem. We didn't use this camera at all, but it was just going between the both of them, right? We had a camera operator, the guy that took the picture, he was going back and forth between them. We ended up not using it because we actually didn't use a ton of this interview, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Again, not super hard to achieve though. Like if you wanted 2 camera setup using your phones, you could do that, right? This could be a phone right there, and then you have maybe another phone on the side or something like that. Like it's completely possible, just to give that different angle. Sometimes you want that different angle if you have to make a hard cut. Like if they say something, like they have like a big you want to cut that out, you cut to that other shot, right? And it just seamlessly fits together. And we'll talk a lot about that next week. In the shot 2, you see a reflector right there, that circled thing. And what that is, that's just like a white board, right? Bouncing light into them, just to help light that dark side of this face. That's called fill light. That is a like $5 piece of foam core from Home Depot that has a white side and it has a metal side, reflective side. And you can really see on my colleague John, my supervisor John, he's really lit up really well from that. It's just filling in a little bit on her, just enough to like make that side pop a little bit more than it was. This is so handy that like when we were shooting that abalone video, we were in Long Beach. We're like, hey, we're gonna stop by Home Depot to pick it up. And we found one, Tim, my colleague, found one in his door that passes through the hotel room. And so we were able to just use that, and we got like a ton of funny looks walking through the lobby with that thing. It was like a really nice hotel, but like they're all around and they're super helpful and handy. And lastly, you see this big thing here. We actually did not use this in the shoot. This is called a silk. So it just diffuses light as we go through. It actually, you can see it's a cloudy day, and there was just enough diffusion in the sky that we ended up moving it out of the way. But we have that there because if we use lights or something like that, it is a really easy way to create some really soft, big lights, and they make smaller versions of that. But yeah, this is kind of what our shoot looks like. And actually, John is actually asking the questions here. And I'm just manning the camera and make sure the audio sounds good.
Can you repeat what the previous arrow was pointing to? Didn't see a shiny thing near the woman in the frame.
Yeah, so it's actually so that's the light pointing off into her. You can see she's a little lit. You can really see.
It's the back side of it, right?
Yeah, the shiny side is the back side right now. It's kind of hard to see on this projection. But there is a shiny part here. I normally don't use that. It's like just metal. It's just really harsh. And if we use a fill, we're using that soft white foam core side that you see there. You can peel those stickers off. That's just a sticker over it. And we usually peel that off. And this is what that shot looked like, right? There's a lot of effort for that shot. You see the sun's coming across, it's pretty low on the horizon, so it's coming through a lot of atmosphere and really diffusing it for us, creating a nice big source. And there's our baby running around. She ran around everywhere. But this is something you can really recreate. You don't have to go on top of a hill to recreate it, right? You can go into like window light, right? So we have nice big windows in this room. I think this is the educational building at the medical center. And I mean, it's that easy. Like here, I would just pull this back and boom, you'd have a good light source. In the back of the room, I wouldn't pull it all the way around, right? I would just pull off a little bit. So a lot of light hits her, or hits the subject, and it falls off to the background.
What's preferred, natural light or artificial light?
I always go natural light because it looks natural. Like when we start bringing in lights, and we have lights that we use a lot, it can get tough to like make it look natural, especially at the speed that we're working at. We're in and out the door. When we do have artificial lights, we use one of those silks. We use a much smaller version of that, and we push light through there because we are just trying to recreate that again. So that's our goal. That's what we're always trying to aim for, is create something like that.
I found that when you have somebody next to her in front of a window, if a cloud goes by, it totally get change in the exposure and it washes out the shot. Do you just deal with that in post-processing?
Yeah, there is that saying, you'll fix it in post, but it's tough when something like that happens. Most times I have them far enough away towards just that ambient light is enough to, that's not as big of an issue happening. If that cloud comes across and completely changes it, sometimes you just gotta deal with it. And if I notice if it's a big enough change, like you go from a bright day and all of a sudden we have a cloud coming through, I will fix the exposure on the camera right there, and I know that I might just have to cut or cover that in post. So oftentimes with the cameras that we're working with, it's tough to to fix something that dramatic in post, right? If you're using a DSLR, it's tough. Even the cameras we use when we shoot really what we call flat, it can be really tough to change. So you just have to like just make a decision, right? You can't like dilly-dally though about it, like and just like maybe I'm gonna change it and change it back. Just make that choice to make it better exposure. Cool. So as you're producing your interview, right? We want to keep composition in mind. The rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is essentially this grid, right? So we have the lines going down, splitting this to thirds different ways. In this case, we have their heads in the top third, and they are right there on the thirds on the sides. If you go back to this other shot here, the picture is weighted kind of to the third half, top third half. It's her eyes are a little bit below that third line. Most of that has to do with just the framing and her hair in the back. But it's pretty close. And she's right in the middle, right? She's in that middle third. There's no problem putting people in the middle. Oftentimes you'll see them on the side here, on the side here. It's your choice, right? So we're keeping our composition in mind. We are finding that pleasing line. And again, window light is a winner. Anything bouncing off light to that big soft source, right? That's what we're looking for. During the production, we are considering the mics. We talked about booms, lavaliers, or wireless. If you are in that camera that doesn't have what we call XLR inputs, those three-pronged audio inputs, and you have just a 3.5 millimeter jack, so like if you're using a DSLR, that's what you have. Sometimes you have to use the wireless setup, and that works great. Some buildings on campus don't. I know we have somebody from RMI here. They do not work in your building. It's just metal, and so you have to use something else. We're shooting at a low aperture. So an aperture is that, if you look on your camera, you have two numbers, right? You have a 1 over something, and if you're shooting video, it'll be 1 over 50, right? And then you have another number that says like 2.8, 3.5. That's your aperture, right? And we want to be down at that lower end, the smaller number. What that's going to do, it's going to blur out the background. And that's what we want. We want to create that separation in your interview. Some lenses don't go down very low, right? They go to like maybe to 5.6 sometimes, which is not a super low aperture. We'll zoom in or get closer. That'll help really blur out that background and create some separation. Here's a great example of it. Super busy background, right? But I'm able to zoom in and go to low aperture, and really it kind of makes a really interesting background now because we're able to, blur out enough with it. Again, some window light. I parked them right in front of a window. This is at the Mondavi, RMI, and it worked out great there. Yep.
How did you do that? You said make that really super busy background.
Yeah. So I shot at a really low aperture, and so I think I shot this at 2.8, and that's just the lens that I have. Most lenses, well, the really good lenses go to 2.8. Like consumer lenses, kit lenses, they probably hang around 3.5 or 4. But so you get as low as you can, and you zoom in. I shot this probably close to 200 millimeters, so I zoomed really far in for it, just to really blur that background out.
If you don't have the tools on like the camera to do this, can you do this in post?
It's tough, a little bit tougher to do in video and post. I'd probably find some other way to shoot it. To be honest, it's like you could, but you'd have to what we call rotoscoping them out. And if you're at that level of video production, you probably have that gear, I'd imagine. But you could, in theory.
Yeah. So is it easier to set up a shot do most of the work before, so it's easier to do?
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. The more work you can do in camera in the field, so it makes this part way easier. Definitely. If I didn't have that ability, I would find another way to shoot. I think at the end of the day. What drove this though was not so much the background, it was like the window light, right? Like I wanted that gorgeous window light, so it's like, all right, that's the way he's facing. So what am I gonna do about the background? And so I was able to blur it out. Okay, so as you're going into interviewing, you wanna make sure that you're the director, right? You know what you need to get. So, you're the one that's kind of dictating the interview. I mean, obviously you're being nice and pleasant about it, but remember that you're the one that's directing. You're the one in charge here. You gotta figure out where they're looking. If you notice in all our videos, everybody looks at the camera. This is a very conscious decision that we've made. I used to be one of those people that looked off, that only shot people that looked off camera. But these days we're watching videos like on our phones or laptops. It's a very personal experience, right? So we want to honor that experience and have them look directly at them as they speak. Also, if somebody's looking off, I'm like, what's over there? Like, should I be looking over there too? Like, what's happening? Why is that important? You make your choices though. You want to keep your nonverbal cues nonverbal, right? So I must look like the stupidest person in the world when I'm doing an interview because I'm just like cheesing it and like looking with my eyes and stuff. Like you can't say anything, right? Because the worst thing in the world is like they say something great and you like step on your quote by saying, oh, that's so interesting. So you hear yourself in it, right? Or you laugh when they laugh. You want to be quiet as you're doing this. And you want to turn your phones off, right? Have them turn their phones off if possible to help really ensure you get good sound. Again, when we talked about sound, again, I just want to reemphasize that you really want to listen for an echo. So if you go into a location, I'm like test, making sure that there's like not some weird noise or there's not some weird buzzing from, I'm not directly under a vent or something like that. Okay. So mirror is a really interesting concept in that when you're talking to somebody you're interviewing, depending on your demeanor, like your person you're interviewing tends to reflect that, right? So if you're really thoughtful and you're talking, they'll do that as well, right? Or if you're like, hey, tell me about that, this is so cool, and they'll be like, yeah, like so, mirror. Think about that, try that approach. Encourage your subjects to offer stories for ideas. I think that's, you can get some really interesting quotes out of that. That's a really good technique to use. So when I'm interviewing somebody, like I'm not really looking at, I've set up my camera, I have everything framed, right? I'm not necessarily looking at the shot anymore, right? I'm looking at the screen to check my levels, but I'm really focused in on is listening to what they're saying, right? And I'm looking for a beginning, a middle, and end. I'm looking for sound bites I can use to build off of. So if somebody says something like, all right, that's an ending quote, I got that. Or if they need to build off something, or if they say something, that's almost there, and they say something a little later, like, oh, I can marry those. Like, I'm really thinking as I'm going through this, right? And depending on your subject, sometimes you have to pay them more attention, like they really need that connection, and sometimes they don't. And so, but I am always thinking and doing multiple things and just making sure I'm not peaking. Again, I'm wearing headphones. When I say peaking is that their audio goes so loud that it distorts. So I'm wearing headphones, listening, make sure that's not happening, because there's no fixing that. And easy way of fixing that. And waiting for the answer after the answer. So I'm interviewing somebody and they say something that's pretty close, almost there, and then they stop. Well, I just don't say anything for a little bit. And then it gets awkward. And you let it get awkward, and it gets more awkward, and eventually they want to fill that space with something. And oftentimes you get some really good stuff with that awkwardness. And the interview should feel more like a conversation than a Q&A. I don't go in with a list of questions unless I'm just like not as prepared as I want to be. And sometimes that happens. But like for the most part, like I go in there with, I have like an idea of where the interview is going to go. I have a very good idea of what I want them to say. So I just roll with that. And oftentimes I'm building off questions as well. And it just turns into a conversation versus like, okay, stop, let me look at my paper and interview. Going back to audio and making sure you get good sound, make sure nobody has pieces of paper in their hands, right? Because your microphone will pick up that rustling if they're going. So if they want to say something from that, that's fine. But as soon as you start asking your questions, go ahead and take it out for them, because you'll pick that up and it'll ruin your audio. Okay, cool. So yeah, so it should be more of a conversation than a Q&A. Funny enough, like things happen weird when you're on a shoot, right? They don't go as planned. So we had that big interview set up on the hill. We had to like truck things out there, and it actually wasn't that great of an interview up there. Alexis, she just didn't really respond to that. She was nervous, and there was a baby running around, and there was lights, and there was like 3 people, 2 cameras. It was a big thing. Funny enough, what worked for her was being in the field, the baby on her back, pulling at her hair, and like sheep running around her feet, and she like gave the best interview out there. So when one thing doesn't work, you gotta try something else, right? And people respond in different situations. Just be ready. She still had her microphone, her wireless microphone on her when we took her out there. So it worked out. really well, and it was like 100 times better. Way better. Okay, so that's all the interview stuff. We got our interview stuff. We've done all we can to get the best stuff we can. So that's our A roll, right? When we go into editing next week, we'll talk about like that's like our foundation for the video. And then we need to show a little bit, right? We need to show what the work looks like. This is Anne in the river type stuff. 75% of your video should be B-roll. That's a rough number. Again, it's like, whatever works, but in general, it's a lot, right? You want to show a lot of stuff. We don't necessarily want to look at a talking head the whole time. We're going to shoot wide, medium, tight, and extreme tight shots. We call that visual variety. You're getting a ton of different things. I'll show an example of that. I'm thinking about my story structure, like the things that I need as I'm going around shooting B-roll. Again, this is where I'm thinking about text in mind. Like I need some stuff to lay text over. Garden hose. So garden hose, like, my grandfather used to water the grass like this, in the front yard, just, whipping it around and stuff like that. Don't do that when you're shooting, right? We want to like motivate our movements. And we want to like have nice clean shots. We have like at least 10 seconds that we can use to cover. So that means like maybe I'm just here just for 10 seconds, 10 count in my head. That's usually enough. Unless you're getting some sort of action happening. And then you're getting details, right? We call these like pickup shots. Like, if I'm shooting a bodega, I'm getting shots of the facility itself. I'm getting shots of people walking up and down the facility. I'm getting stuff maybe away from the research too. That really helps as well. I didn't use any in that video, but in other videos there, I know I've used it a ton. We're getting close-ups of hands, close-ups of faces, a bunch of different shots. You can never, ever have too much. And they're just 10 seconds, right? So 10 seconds on the hand, 10 seconds on the face, step back for a wide shot for 10 seconds. It doesn't take that much time. And we're still using a tripod if we need to. I do a lot of hand-holding stuff, but that's just, after a long time of doing this. You still see it's still shaky. You can get away with that these days, though. But for the most part, I am using a tripod on anything that's moving or anything like that.
One question, Johnny. Tripod, what about one of these one-legged pods? What do you call it? Monopod?
Yeah, so what about monopods? So yeah, monopods they have like video monopods now, which are kind of, I'll use a monopod sometimes, specifically at sporting events. The one thing you got to consider is if it has a way for it to go to tilt, right? So like, yes, you want it like this is your lens, you want it to go up and down. We have one that has what's called chicken feet. So it has 3 like little feet coming out of it. So it could technically stand on its own. And we use those for our 360 videos. But I will take that monopod out sometimes because it does give some stabilization and allows you to travel a little lighter. I wouldn't leave it alone though. Like for B-roll, it works great, right? And that one I use particularly doesn't have a tilt head, but a tilt at the feet, so we make it work. Ideally, we would put a tripod head on that, and you can, and then it would have its own tilt up there. It's most times I'm like either hand holding or on a tripod though. And for the most part with B-roll, like because of the style I shoot, I am hand holding and I'm getting up really close. If I've shot a video with some Rebecca at least, and I was like, boom, right up there with her and the pigeons. So I'm shooting wide and close and handheld. Again, I've talked a ton about planning for shots with text. I really enforce that because that's a big theme. If you're on Facebook at all or social media, you'll see that a ton. When I talk about motivating your movements, when I do have movements, and you saw this in the abalone video when they're in Long Beach, there's little kids running along a fountain, right? And I'm tracking them. That's a big motivating movement right there. Sometimes you just do moves just because to make a shot interesting. It's a guard dog.
Sorry, everybody.
And so, like if you've seen the shots where the camera's moving and there's like a sun flare and stuff in it, like, really pretty. Like sometimes you can do that and get away with it. But, it's really conscious. It's not like you're just sitting here and just like spraying the room for shots. And so one thing I always do is I go in and I just get these basic shots, right? These wide, these mediums, these tights, and then I start to get creative, right? Then I start like trying to shoot through things or find creative angles, go up high, go low. You do that afterwards, just because you have, okay, I have my basic stuff, then you get creative. And I'll tell you, most of the time your creative shots, they work. Like, you know, because if you think about it really, like they really do work. So get your coverage, your basics, then we call that the basic shots, and then go get creative. Here's an example of wide, mediums, and some tights. So wide, medium, and then a tight. A nice little sequence that you can put together for videos. Okay, we're getting towards the end of this, I promise. If you're shooting on a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, you know, something like this, you want to shoot at 24 frames per second. That's like kind of what cinema typically is, right? And TV is still at 30 frames per second, but they can handle your 24 frames, no problem. It just looks better. It's prettier. Sometimes, you know, that does matter. When we talk about shutter speeds, right? So there's three things that go into your exposure, right? Your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. Your shutter speed is always going to be half. Think of that 1/24. It's going to be half of your frames per second, right? So we're going to be at 50. And so for the most part, if you guys just have these numbers in mind, you'll be fine, right? If you do happen to shoot at 30 frames per second, then you'll be at 60, it will be your shutter. If you happen to stay at 50, it's not going to be a big deal. Your ISO is always going to be as low as you can go while keeping your proper exposure. So that's like that third part of having a good exposure. And usually when you're looking on the back of the camera, that's like fine. You have a meter back there and stuff like that. When I go into a shoot though, and I'm thinking about exposure, I know I have one thing set, right? I have my 1/50. Some cameras do 1/48, which is extra precise, right? But I also know that I'm shooting with a low aperture, right? I'm shooting at that 2.8, that 3.5. So I really have those two things there. And I adjust my ISO. If you do have one of these cameras, one thing you're definitely gonna need is a neutral density filter. And so this helps you, this is like sunglasses for your lens, right? So this allows you to have a little lower exposure, essentially makes your picture darker. And so that allows you to get to that lower aperture. Super deep concept. If you guys have any questions, again, just email me, talk to me. It's a neutral density filter. Yeah, and I'm gonna have, I'll have some gear and I'll have the link to some in there. This is a variable neutral density filter. I actually don't really like these a ton because they can mess up your picture because it essentially gets darker as you turn, right? And so there's at some points where there's a line from that darkness in there. It can really, sometimes it works, makes the picture look cool, but most of the times it messes it up. So I'll usually just go for kind of like a medium dark one and throw it on there. That's a must to have if you're shooting these. They just really allow you to get to a lower aperture. And these cameras are great to shoot with, and I'll talk about that a little bit here. Okay, some cameras have recording limits, right? So if you have a Canon Rebel or Canon camera, it's a 20-minute maximum recording time. That has to do with like taxes and stuff like that. Like if it goes over 30 minutes, camera companies have to make it a video camera. There's a higher tax for that. So they have these recording limits on there. Some cameras don't. This one doesn't. But something to keep in mind. So if you plan to record like an hour lecture, just know you're going to have to stop and record a couple times. Or your interview too. When we first got into this, I had a camera that did that. Like there was one time I missed 20 minutes of an interview because it stopped recording, and I was like, I forgot to hit record again. It happens. And 1080 is your minimum resolution, right? If you shoot 4K, shoot 4K. If you have an iPhone 6S and above, you can shoot 4K. It's in your settings. That just gives you more flexibility in post. That's twice as large as 1080, so that'll allow you to punch in if you need to for some reason. Any questions? I know that's like a lot of stuff right there. Okay, so we're gonna talk about where is this going, right? So Facebook is like a big viewing place, right? We get most of our views on Facebook. It's a huge network. There's like billions and billions of people on there. Those videos look a very specific way, right? I'm gonna show you one right now that was made specifically for Facebook.
what we found is, in fact, that larvae are not swept offshore as is commonly believed, but actually most of them stay close to home.
So I got so seasick shooting that like just watching that brought back some emotion, right? Cool. So you guys see that there's a lot of text, right, on that. Like if we didn't have the audio on, you would get everything you need to go from that video. That's because 85% of people watching videos on Facebook do not listen to sound, right? Like we have it on there, it's important, but they don't listen to it. So you want to get the point across. We're in a unique situation where we want to highlight our researchers as well as the work. So we do include them and we subtitle them. It's a really short clip, but we want to make sure they get some camera time in there as well. This is great because it's, oh yeah, go for it.
What software do you like for doing animation?
So that was done in After Effects so the question is, what software do we like in animation for animations? We had a person in our office take like a 10-week online course. Maybe it wasn't 10 weeks. I don't know. They took an online course for a couple weeks, and they were able to do that kind of animation afterwards. And so we tapped into those resources we had in our office for that, but we used After Effects for it. There's definitely some other ones out there, like Go Animate is another good one. And we have some colleagues at UC San Diego that uses it a ton. You can have characters and you can make a move and stuff like that. It's really a tool. It's a little cartoony, but that's fine. I do like this mode because it really does simplify the story, right? Like it really makes it in like really digestible ways of information because you can't have a lot of text. Really, you have to boil down that story to the nuts and bolts of it. And it's quick, and it's fast, and it's easy, and people can get what they need to get out of it. You can use B-roll just all. So if you're out, again, just shooting stuff on your own, easy. And you can use photos in there as well. I know there was a photo question. I'm going to answer that. So there's tons of stuff that you can do with that really makes it easier. And these are a little quicker too. You don't have to sift through, however long your interview is. So getting back to where it's going. So YouTube is like really personality driven, right? A good series to look up is the Climate Lab series. So from the UC, they did in partnership with Vox. That's a fantastic series with a researcher on there, visiting researcher from UCLA, who just has this really genuine, curious personality. Definitely worth checking out to see. And their videos have millions of views from that. It's phenomenal stuff. It's the Climate Lab series from UC. Okay, Instagram is, you're thinking, so this is what we're talking about, like where it's going and what it looks like too. So on Instagram, is your video going to be vertical, square? That's probably that's what I'm thinking about and what we do. And it's maybe not the best place to for full long length videos, right? Because audio doesn't play automatically on there. And I am usually subtitling it on Instagram as well. And then Twitter's not the best place for videos, to be honest. We do put them up there and they do all right. But GIFs, people love GIFs. And I use Easy GIF. And what I'll do is I'll just export a piece of video and just upload to that. And you get and here's the thing, GIFs can be, if you export them from like Photoshop or they can be really large files because GIFs are just traditionally really large. I found this site to really compress them really well and give you a reasonable file size to work with. Okay, I'm gonna talk about gear real fast here. It's not cheap, and this is a commitment all the way around, from time to resources to gear and stuff like that. So if you're gonna consistently produce video, it's gonna be it'll be an investment, right? But with that said, you can do it with your phone. Everybody has a phone in their pocket, right? And there are tools out there for that. I have links to all these things in the presenter notes. which I think there'll be a link to as well. They do make a version of this that goes right into the lightning port if you are on an iPhone that doesn't, have a headphone jack anymore. This one in particular is like $70. This is really good for outside. It's really great for outside. And it comes with this nice big, we call this a dead can. So that is, and they have one for the lightning port as well. That one's a little more expensive though. This is a lapel mic. This is actually really good. They make some cords long enough to where if you did have an interview of them on camera, you just have to be really close so that cord dips and comes up there. But this is also really good if you're doing just recording an interview, like if you want to do a podcast or something like that. This one again is about $70 as well. It is that headphone jack. Shure does make one for the lightning port. That one is about $170. Really great. You just use your regular voice recording app for that. If you do want to use your phone again, you do have to find a way to mount it on your tripod. And it's just one of these guys. I think it's like $15. Yeah, $15. And it just mounts right onto the tripod. And this is just like a grabby tripod that can do a bunch of different stuff, right? It's loose. And then if you want to get real fancy, you can get a gimbal that makes nice, smooth shots. I think I saw this the other day for like $170. This version, they have a new version now. I have no idea what the difference is. But it's super cool and adds a lot of production value to it. It is battery powered and keeps you really stable.
What does that do? Why is there battery in it?
So it actually has a motor on that circular side right there, and it just helps to keep it level. So like if you have shakes, it'll keep that iPhone in that same location right there. Obviously, if you move, the camera's moving, but it doesn't really take out like steps, but it keeps it pretty smooth if you're doing this. It takes out like the jittery parts of the movement. Okay, if you want to do more than iPhones, the kit I've just got around to recommending, it's with this camera, this GH4, shoots 4K. If you guys haven't seen it yet, we did a big video with the eco-geomorphology class, rafting down the Grand Canyon. It's grandcanyon.ucdavis.edu. I took this camera with me. It's the only camera I used, and a GoPro that we mounted on people. And it's a great camera. Altogether, the kit, and I have is about $2,500. So if you have a department that's really into it, that's what we recommend. You could go with like a Rebel or something like that. You do run into issues. Sometimes they don't have headphone jacks, the recording limits, whatever. This shoots 4K. And there's a link to that wish list. It's a general wish list that we send out to people that if they want to get camera gear. In that list, of course, is this camera. It's $1,000 right now. A good thing about it is a mirrorless system, which I super recommend. It has an EVF, so if you're out shooting in the sun, you can look through the eyepiece. You're not just looking at the back part, though if you want to look at the back part, you can. It is super hard to see, though, when it's bright. Tremendous battery life. I took like 15 batteries with me down the Grand Canyon for like 10 days. I used 2 because it has such good battery life. I can't say enough good things about it. It has the best picture out of the camera that I've seen of just coming straight out. Lenses, you always want to buy the most expensive lens that you can, right? The best lens that you can. Sometimes you just can't afford it though. So in that list, I have a kit lens that is about $300. These are all super nice lenses. This first one, my favorite lens ever. It's on there. If I had to have one lens, it would be that. It's about $800 though. What I like about it is that it has a really low aperture. And so shoot, a super low light. It is manual, but it is awesome. These are those neutral density filters. This is the kit I would get. So this comes with 3 different versions of it. Dark, not so dark, and then not really dark at all. You do have to take it off and rotate between them, but it's way better than having your shot messed up by the variable. These are anywhere from $30 to $300 depending on the quality. And then wireless microphone system. This is probably the cheapest, most reliable wireless system out there. It's by Rode. It's called the Rode Link. It's about, I want to say it's $400. So there are cheaper versions out there, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. It's just a matter of how often you shoot and how often you want to deal with that. But they are out there. All right, so we did have some questions when people submitted that I wanted to get through real fast. What are things not to do when using a photo to tell a story? How many photos are enough? When do you decide to use video over still images? I actually only took part of this question because there were some parts of it that didn't really apply to what I do. But so when using photos, I don't do anything crazy with them. I just usually zoom in on them, a really slow zoom. And sometimes there are, depending on the editing platform you use, there's just a setting for that. Next week, I'll go over and just show you how I do that. It's pretty easy. But I don't do any like wipes or like funny transitions or anything like that. And depending on if they're vertical or they're horizontal, like I'll treat them all the same no matter what though. Like, so if I have, you saw in that first turtle video, they had a lot of vertical videos and vertical photos, stuff like that. So they treated it a very certain way, right? They put a white background and that on top of it. I do try to fill the frame as much as I can with stuff, but you can't always do that depending on the photo. But yeah, I don't have a magic number that I use. Sometimes I use only videos, only photos, because that's what we have. But I always do prefer to use video if I have it. I'll always use that first, as long as it looks good. Unless the photo is like super amazing, I don't always. Oh, so I broke this question out. So how do you quickly/easily make videos? I didn't really have a good answer for that one. Make bad ones, but that's a joke. So you develop a workflow. That's really the answer, right? They're going to take time. If you want to make a good video, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. But you can develop a workflow, right? And so if you are doing a series of videos, you can have a really standardized workflow with that. You can create templates, so with your text as well. If you are using text a lot, you can just create a quick template. So the video is really structured in there, and it helps you really fly through presets. But at the end of the day, it takes time, and it takes workflow, and it takes experience to really figure out what works for you. So how to use music without violating copyright stuff? The easiest way is to pay for it, and there are a couple different options out there. So Audio Jungle is a great one. It's about $20 per song. People are coming all the time with it. You can use that song anywhere at that point. If you have a commercial, what have you, it's all there. Audio Blocks is $100 per year. It's great. I guarantee you though, you will hear this song, some songs like on TV. You'll hear a commercial and you'll be like, oh, hey, that was an Audio Blocks, which is weird because it's not a very high end one, but like you'll hear it. Like our videos on Facebook. Now This News, if you guys follow them, like their videos are those text-based ones. All the time we're using the same songs. And then Music Bed is a higher end one. They really have some really high quality music. $200 per song. And you can use it pretty much mostly anywhere, not in a commercial. That's a different price point. But those are some great options there. If you find a public domain song, you have to credit them, usually. Usually I'll credit them at just the end of the video, and I'll include a link in the description, just to show them some love, because they did use their song. So what are good ways to practice visual storytelling as a grad student who doesn't have a lot of time? To be a good storyteller, you already have this experience, right? Like you guys know how to tell stories. It's just about making it fit this medium. That's always first and foremost. The technical part just comes with doing. Like there's just no way around it. It's just like anything, you got to just practice, shoot those 100 free throws a day, whatever, just like keep going and keep shooting. Another good idea is to be part of a community. Like if you're part of some sort of community that's really interested in doing this, like you have this room, people are interested in doing video, like you can work together. Some people are stronger in one area than other. That's like a huge part. Like when I was in film school journalism school, but like we all had our parts, and that was a big, big help. So, and there's like a film school on this campus. They're constantly looking for stories. We get all our interns from there. So that's another really easy way to do it, is be part of a community. Okay, and so how long should your videos be? Again, I talked about this earlier, and it's simply just like if it feels long, it's because it is long. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. If it gets boring, if you start drifting, you got to take some stuff out. And so and after a while, you kind of get the idea of like, this feels repetitive. And that's usually why it's too long. There's some repetition in there, or there's just too much detail in there, or there's just words maybe people don't understand in there. So just keep cutting as much as you need to. And that's it, guys. Do you guys have any questions? I don't know what time it is. Okay.
I know y'all partnered with the New York Times and Wall Street, or the Washington Post on a couple of videos, but for videos that you don't have, like high-profile partners like that, how do you get your videos in front of an audience?
Yeah. So our biggest driver of videos is by far Facebook, right? So we will put, we have an amazing social media team who has really built up our Facebook audience. And so organically, when we post a video, if we just post a video up there, it's maybe if it gets 10,000 views, that's amazing. That's great for us. Sometimes we'll boost those videos. We'll give them like a little money behind it for advertising, essentially, so it gets into people's feed more. I suspect that's probably like a trend that's going to have to continue with the announcement that Facebook is like prioritizing friends information. And so like that was billed as being very nice, but it's also like a very good financial move for them, right? Because now people are going to have to pay more if you're a business to get in front of them. And that's just part of it though. So sometimes we'll do that as well. But for the most part, we're on Facebook posting, we're sharing on Twitter, using our social platforms. And we're hoping to pick up some earned media as well. Most of our stuff's tied to a news release, research release, paper's gone out. And so that'll help drive traffic as well.
As a researcher, I mean, if we know we have a paper coming out, I could spend 100 hours making a fancy video, but I don't have any place necessarily going to.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be picked up. So is there somewhere here at Davis that works with researchers? I mean, should we not make a video until we've already got some communication with the news department? And are there requirements about how we present our research? If we wanted to do so independently, is Davis going to be like, no, or?
Yeah, so I can answer some of that, I think. So the question is about like if you are a researcher here, at what point are you like contacting people to put it out?
Like investing a lot of
time
in
promoting.
a video that may go nowhere.
Yeah.
Like having an audience for it.
Totally.
Not part of the UC Davis, whatever your Facebook feed is.
Yeah. So one thing I would say about research is sometimes we'll get some really great research, right? And it's the paper's about to come out, and we missed all the opportunity to like collect visuals. So one thing I would say is that like consistently, if you're a researcher, can collect visuals as you're going out, right? Like take pictures of your work, take pictures of you out there. And like, again, it's super important to promote the work. It's also really important for us to promote our researchers. Like, we want them to own it, to be the face of that. We want them to be experts, right? So if they're determined as experts, like, people will come back. They're like, oh, that person was expert in like, fish and water runoffs or something like that, right? They'll go back to that person because they saw that. So there is some like long tail, positive, things that come from that. So I would say collecting it, and collecting is, I don't think that big of an investment, right? We're not necessarily putting a video together, but if we get that visual data, those assets, that is tremendous, right? And there are some projects that like I will collect over, 6-7 months because we know eventually we're going to go out with it. So we'll go out every once in a while. As far as like putting it out and stuff like that, I would definitely start with whoever your communications coordinator in your department is. And then, they'll go from there depending on the project itself.
I'd like to add to that and say, Pat Curlin is a great resource too. She's the environmental press officer at Strategic Communications. And as far as an audience, if you continually and consistently put out content, people will pick it up, and you'd be surprised at the power of sharing. I created a video actually on my phone about an augmented reality sandbox, and it picked up the attention of NPR Science Friday. And some of our researchers got selected and put onto a live show. So don't underestimate the power of just consistency and somehow, like, someone picks it up.
Sorry. I've like skipped over him like 6 times already.
Just further to that, how do you assess the impact and effectiveness of all this effort?
That's a good question. So, I mean, so there's a couple different metrics that we have internally as far as like what's successful, right? So the question is like, how do we measure impact? Obviously, a really easy one is views, but that's not always like a very obvious one, right? So placement is a good one. So for that larvae story, we put a B-roll package together and we sent it to PBS because they were like, I don't know if we're gonna go out there. And they got the B-roll package, like, okay, it's worth us going out there. They actually just won an award for it. So that's a big win for us too. So there's like multiple different ways, right? Like one's media pickup, views, interactions, right? Maybe we have low views, but we have a lot of conversation around it. So that's important too.
Yeah, so just wondering, maybe you or somebody else in the room understand the little notion on Facebook when you get reached.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we put a post out the other day and we had like over 1,300 reached.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't had before. Usually we just get about 200, 500 or something like that. What is that? What does that, you know?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So I'm definitely not the best person to ask that. And seriously, you should email my colleague, Sally Poggi. She gave the last speak, and she could break that in a quick, really quick email about reach. But you just got in front of people. That's what I take that to mean.
Yeah,
So yeah, reach is, I get a little confused between reach and impressions. And so impressions being you getting in front of somebody. But she would be great. Her or Carla Fung in our office, great people.
The university has some specific reservations and concerns about the use of their logo or even the use of their name. If you've made a video, is there an office you have to pass that through before you can get permission to stick a UC Davis logo on it, or even say that you're associated with it without risk of looking like you're totally representing the university?
Yeah, so okay, so the question is, when it comes to like logo or just associating with the university, do you have to go through some sort of office? So if you're a UC employee or student or someone doing some sort of research, I mean, like the hope is that maybe you're not misrepresenting yourself in that case. And if there is concern that you might be, yeah, you could totally reach out to our office of strategic communications. In general, when it comes to like altering the logo, like that is a big no-no, right? We don't want to we want to be consistent, and that benefits everybody. That's not like we're just trying to be hard on somebody, like, no, you're using that wrong. That consistency really, across it, like it really helps us in our messaging out to the world. In general though, like, if you have any concerns, it is just check. And that way, like, maybe you don't hear the answer you want, but like at least and you cover yourself in that case. In general though, I don't personally, I don't really run into that a ton, to be honest. I think most people are using it okay. I mean, is it tasteful? That's, it's always up for debate, but like for the most part, I think it's fine. We just don't want to alter that logo, use a different font, or anything like that. Do you have some more questions? Did I see anybody? Cool. If you guys have any questions, I am always available by email. And so feel free, it's jproudman@ucdavis.edu. And I'm in Marac calls. If you stop by if you want, we're around. Cool. Thank you.